we are at the marvelous box office of the Crest Theatre. I spent a lot of time here. In 1949, this had the most beautiful glass. It went all the way up into this plasterwork and was beautifully etched. There were some waves along the bottom, but over the years it didn't survive the swirling misty tide and the onset of Sacramento's ever-changing K Street. Originally been, of course, a thoroughfare for traffic. Then, by the time we got to the Crest in 1986, there was this set of concrete blocks and crazy ponds and little waterways. I later found out that it was supposed to be a concrete representation of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. But in the 80s, the only place you could get an idea that that's what it was is if you went to John Q's at the top of the Holiday Inn, 7 or 8 blocks away, and looked down on it. For the rest of us, it was just a monstrosity. We couldn't figure out why it was there. Of course, when they did make this a mall, they tore up the street, and the original terrazzo floor of the Crest, the beautiful terrazzo, multiple colors, was just sliced off right at the front of the box office line. Originally had gone all the way out to the curb. But fortunately, most of it, and still in quite good shape, is still visible at the Crest today. I think it was Mike Sotocono and Sons, the terrazzo experts, that laid that in mid-1949 before the theater opened.
What was the theater mostly used for over the years between, say, like, well, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s? Was it mainly for movies, or did bands play here?
It was always a movie house, but we have to sort of go back before it was the Crest to get a sense of what occupied 1013 K Street historically. The Empress Theatre was the first theater on this site in 1913. That operated for a while, but the operators of the Empress were, well, shall I say, they were somewhat shoddy businessmen and took advantage of the local merchants and then ran off with the money. So that business venture failed, and then the Hippodrome replaced the Empress on this spot. The outer structure of the Hippodrome is essentially the same today. The Crest was built inside that same shell in 1949. The Hippodrome operated from 1918 to 1946 by Lowe's Incorporated. Primarily, there were some other operators for a brief period of time. I think near the end of that period, Fox West Coast Theaters acquired it. It was motion pictures with vaudeville. There was a theater organ here, a Robert Morton theater organ, and full stage shows with pictures, which was the common way to see movies from, let's say, 1925 to 1934, 33, where you'd come in, the shows were continuous, you came in whenever you wanted, you paid a dime, 35 cents, and then you would just sit there in the theater until what you saw on the stage or screen repeated. Then you'd know you'd seen the whole show, and it brought a phrase into the vernacular, which was, "This is where I came in." And so that's how you knew you'd seen the whole show. And the show would be 4 hours in length. It would be a tremendously long program, which would have a 45-minute stage show, a newsreel, cartoon, 1 or 2 features, all for 10 cents, and you just came in whenever you felt like it. Got off the streetcar and you stayed, or you could stay all day and watch Fred dance with Ginger all over again. It was a wonderful era of movie-going. In those days, there weren't concessions sold in the theater. You'd have to bring in candy from somewhere else if you wanted to sneak it in. By World War II, that changed, of course, because executives seized on the fact they could make a lot of money by selling refreshments in the theater. Of course, that really became a boom after World War II, when all the soldiers were back and starting families again. There was a great deal of money to be made by offering concessions. So, in September of 1946, the Hippodrome's marquee collapsed due to a sympathetic vibration picked up from blasts occurring at the Roos Brothers department store building, which was being constructed. That building still exists, just over here to the left of the Crest Theatre. It's not the building immediately to the left, but just one storefront over, and that is the Roos Brothers building. When those blasts loosened the marquee, horizontal canopy of the marquee just slammed down like a door with the supports lost. and actually killed a woman and child who happened to be passing by underneath. So the theater was shuttered for 3 years and then opened as the Crest, operated by Fox West Coast Theaters on the 6th of October of 1949, which I've already mentioned. From that moment forward, in answer to your question so many moments ago, it was strictly a movie house. The very first live show that occurred here was in 1986, shortly after we started operating the theater. When I say we, I was in the employ of Linda McDonough and a company called CSLM Incorporated, made up of the initials of the 4 initial partners of the company that leased the Crest Theatre to operate it in this fashion. And so we brought in the first live show here was a concert by the Shirelles with that wonderful late 50s sound, and that ushered in live entertainment to the Crest for the first time since the Hippodrome had live entertainment many years before. The Crest was built like a Fabergé egg inside the shell of the Hippodrome, which had had a full stage fly gallery. By 1949, stage shows were out. Live music in movie houses was out. Television already started to exist and was a big competition, so most of the live talent that would have been on the stage in theaters in that era moved to the small box in the living room and were appearing on variety shows there. So the movie houses throughout the 50s and 60s primarily concentrated on big screen attractions. Continuing to have really competition from television, the movie industry came up with all sorts of gimmicks to get people back into the theaters. 3D, CinemaScope, stereophonic sound, Technicolor, all things were improved to give people that big show experience. The Crest was a fabulous house in that era, the 50s, for those type of entertainments. Fox West Coast was, of course, part of the 20th Century Fox studio, which pioneered and licensed through Bosch and Lohm the CinemaScope process, which they called the miracle you see without glasses. And the CinemaScope process started in 1954, and so The Robe was the first movie in CinemaScope. That played down the street at the Fox Theatre on the other side of the street and 1 block down. But just a block away from each other, the same company were operating the same, 2 very large theaters. The Crest at that time had 1,200 seats. Now it's at about 900 and some. Seats were moved in the area where the stage currently is now in the Crest Theatre. The seats actually originally went all the way up to the screen, about 5 feet or 6 feet away from the screen in the main drape or curtain. So CinemaScope arrived at the Crest with great vigor and was very well received. Later on, probably one of the greatest attractions at the Crest was the Sound of Music, which was in CinemaScope and stereophonic sound. That ran here at the Crest for a year and a week. I'm sure the staff turnover must have been terrific because, after hearing how do you solve a problem like Maria more than 14 times, suicide becomes a viable option. So that was one of the big engagements here. But people saw many great films in the first run here at the Crest over the years. When we were operating it from 1986 and really reopened it, it had closed probably for regular films by the late 70s. There was an attempt to put a dinner theater in here operated by Herb Liverette, who was a real estate man, but it didn't quite take off. He actually was going to have Dave Mogavera, a local architect, make it into a big supper club and put in a glass ceiling, but luckily none of that transpired, and the Crest was essentially preserved, as you still see it now.